had myself and Gopal Krishna and Giriraj run to different stalls that were making murri, and then he sampled, you know, from each stall, and he picked the one that he liked. We got a big bag of murri, and then we set off again, and Prabhupada was eating in the back and then passing it out to the rest of us after he was eating. So I was a little surprised that after being sick, vomiting, that Prabhupada was eating again so soon, and I mentioned that, and Prabhupada smiled. He said, "Murri is so innocent that you can eat it any time." Murri is puffed rice, like in Bengal. Prabhupada had a wonderful way, you know, of expressing things. Murri is so innocent, you can eat it at any time. So it took 6 hours to get back here to Bombay. We arrived, I guess, about 2 o'clock. It was well past the time that Prabhupada normally had his massage. And I knew, I mean, we could see he was very weak and tired from the journey, just sitting there for 6 hours in a car. And as usual, the devotees here, they'd made up an arati tray. They had some system. They knew when Prabhupada arrived. The car went to the back there, and Prabhupada went up into his quarters. And they already had a full arati tray set up to do Guru Puja. And Prabhupada didn't say anything. He came in his room, he sat down, and then they were just about to blow the conch and begin the arati. Devotees had packed the room out, and I thought, no way I'm going to let this happen. So somebody mentioned the other day about the different degrees of service. A good servant, or the best kind of servant, anticipates what the spiritual master wants and does it without being asked. Second-class servant, they are told what to do and they execute that very nicely. And a third-class servant, even if he's told, he still doesn't do it properly. So I just took it into my own hands that I'm not going to sit here and watch Srila Prabhupada have to go through a half-hour, you know, Guru Puja and Kirtan. He's very sick. So I just picked up the arati tray. I gave it back to, it might have been Nistrigunya or somebody. I said, "That's it. I'm sorry, but you all have to leave. Prabhupada has to have his massage and he needs some rest." So one or two of the devotees got a bit agitated. Hari Sori's throwing us out. We're here to worship our spiritual master. But that was sometimes something that you had to do as Prabhupada's servant. You had to protect him sometimes. So I looked at Prabhupada. As I said, they were beginning to object. Somebody raised their voice a little loudly so that Prabhupada would hear and maybe intervene and say, no, let them do. But he didn't. He just sat there and said nothing. That was, you know, confirmation, yes, please give me this relief. So I pushed everybody out the door. Not literally, but I sent them out, and immediately Prabhupada was relieved. He said, "All right, now let's have massage." So I gave him his massage. After that we had his lunch, and then he was fit. So that's another little pastime, Bombay pastime. Bombay was an interesting place. Prabhupada liked to come here. It was kind of like a transit station sometimes. Sometimes he'd be here for a day or 2 days. Sometimes he would stay for a couple of weeks. There's lots of other pastimes. What was that one I asked? All right. Last thing about the buzzer. We had this long electrical lead, a button at one end, a bell at the other. And wherever Prabhupada was, the first thing that we would do, of course, is set up his dictaphone and put out all his personal paraphernalia on his desk. The idea in traveling with Prabhupada was that when he left one place, because he had certain items that he kept on his desk, you know, some pens and some cardamom seeds and different other items. And when Prabhupada left a place, as soon as he walked out the door, the servant would get his attaché case and then pick up all the items off his desk that he used on a regular basis, put them in the attaché case, and then run out after him. And then when we arrived at the place that we were going, I'd run in front and take everything out, put them on his desk, so that when Prabhupada came in, it was no difference from when he left to, you know, it's like a transition to where he was arriving. So one of those items was the buzzer, and the button was next to Prabhupada's desk, and then the lead was long enough so that we could feed it through the window and into the room next door where the servant was staying. So we'd been on the world tour in 1976, as I mentioned yesterday or the day before. We began in Bombay, and we ended up coming back to Bombay in mid-August. So the last stage of the world tour was a visit to Iran, to Tehran. We stayed there for 6 or 7 days. So when we arrived there, we flew in from France. It was very late at night. Atreya Rishi was there, Nandarani and Dayananda were there. Navayovana was there with his wife, and Gyanagamya, he was the only brahmachari, and Paramahamsa Swami, he was the only sannyasi. So, small yatra, and Prabhupada had gone there just to encourage them. Yeah, there was not really any reason for him to be personally there, but being in Iran was very difficult for them. Of course, at that time it wasn't as bad as it is now. In those days, the Shah of Iran was still in power, so Americans were fairly welcome, as long as you kept your head down. So they had this one place that they were renting, Atreya Rishi. He was an accountant, and he had opened up a branch of Arthur Young. Arthur Young's was a big accountancy firm. They did all the big, you know, corporations and stuff. And so in order to get to the Middle East and preach, Atreya Rishi had convinced Arthur Young, the executives there, that you should have a branch in Iran. So they paid for everything. So he got this big house. We arrived at the house. It was about 11 o'clock at night. There were 2 new Iranian bhaktas. So they were immediately introduced to Srila Prabhupada. He preached to them for half an hour or so. He had Nandarani make him some evening snack, maybe murri. And it got to about 1 o'clock in the morning. Then Prabhupada sent everybody to take rest. And then he himself, he went into the room that we'd allocated for him. No rest whatsoever. He sat down and immediately started translating. I saw him do that a number of times. He would literally not sleep at all, not even a minute. He would come, sit down, translate, work all through the day, and then go into his, through the night, and then go into his regular routine. He did that several times when we were in Hawaii also. So he was, you know, sitting down. He got his Bhagavatam out. He got his dictaphone, began working. So I went into the room next door, rolled out my sleeping bag, and I just crawled into my sleeping bag. I was completely, you know, tired. And the bell went. So I jumped out my sleeping bag, ran into Prabhupada's room, offered my obeisances, and Prabhupada was trying to do something with the dictaphone. It wasn't working properly. So he said, just fix this. I had no idea, you know, about electronics and stuff. And I jiggled around. I found that there was some connection that was loose. So I got it working. All right, so then Prabhupada continued on with his work. I went back in the room. I laid down. I'm just drifting off to sleep. Burn. I jump up. I run into Prabhupada's room. It's still not working properly. So again, I made an adjustment. It started working. I went back into my room, started lying down, just going to sleep. Burn. Like this 5 times. As soon as I was drifting off to sleep, the buzzer went. I had to jump up and run in and, you know, fix this problem with the dictaphone. So after the 5th time, I went back into my room. I laid down. I'm just going to sleep. Brr, 6th time. So I jumped up. I ran into Prabhupada's room, offered my obeisances, and looked up. And Prabhupada's working away. Nothing's wrong. And he looks at. He kind of gave me a sidelong glance, like, "What are you doing here?" So there's nothing wrong. I had dreamt the 6th time. I was so wired up. As soon as I laid down and went to sleep, so I dreamt that one. But anyway, that's the way it was. We were kind of trained up to be aware, or, you know, alert, even when we were in deep sleep. Okay, so it's 9:20. I think we'll finish at this point. There's lots more that could be said, but does anybody have any quick questions before we finish? Or comments? Jaya Parush Prabhu.
So during those times that Sri Prabhupada was coming here, the devotees here might think that I'm hearing pastimes that I'm already aware of because I was here. But in fact, at 90% of the time, when I was here and Srila Prabhupada was here, I was in the kitchen or on the altar.
Yes.
And I was completely unaware of what was going on. So it's really amazing. I'm hearing 40 years later pastimes that I was not even aware of, even though I was right here under the same roof.
Well, most of what I've spoken about this morning actually has not been published yet. In the 5 volumes that I've put out, that goes up to December 1976. So all the pastimes after that are still yet to be published. The next volume is about 75% complete, but it needs still a lot of work. But that includes, you know, the visit to Hyderabad, Wardha, the whole episode with the Malhotra family, the Pandal in March, the last big Pandal, and then of course Prabhupada, the decision to take Prabhupada back to Vrindavan. So that's all got to be published yet. So everybody can please put in a prayer to Ras Bihari that I can complete that before I leave. I've been very slack actually about getting everything in writing, but nowadays I'm really becoming keenly aware of the need to finish it off before I get finished off. So any other questions or comments?
Well, just one other.
Sava. Yes, he had a small container, silver container, on his desk, and it had some Bodha cardamom seeds in it. And it was mentioned last night that Prabhupada sometimes he would take Yogendra Ras. So when I first joined the party, that was one of the regular routines in the morning, that we would mash up one big-sized cardamom seed with Yogendra Ras and some honey, and Prabhupada would take that straight out of the, you know, these mortar and pestle. He would put that in his mouth and twirl it around, and he did that for a few months. Then he stopped taking it. But then again in '77, for a short while, he started taking that Yogendra Ras again. So that container with the cardamom seeds was part of his regular paraphernalia. Oh, one last thing. Nabi Yogendra Maharaj mentioned last night how he tried to make some neem pakoras without much success. Nobody wanted to eat them. But when we were here in Bombay in April of '76, we were just preparing to leave on the last world tour. We were going from here to Australia on the first leg. So a few days before we left, Prabhupada called me in and he said, I want you to get some powdered neem. So I had no idea how to get powdered neem. So he said, you just get a branch from a neem tree, put it on the roof, let it dry out in the sun, then you collect all the leaves and then mash them up into a powder. So I did it, and then I carried that with me for nearly 3 months on the tour. Prabhupada never referred to it a single time, and I was almost tempted to toss it out, thinking, you know, he's not going to use this, but then I thought, no, better not, you know, wait till we get back to India. And as it happened, when we got to London and France in July, August of '76, Prabhupada got very, very sick. In London, practically he didn't eat for about 3 days. And he had this very, very heavy cold and flu. He almost flew straight back from London here to Bombay because he said the weather suited him better here and it would aid his recovery. And then Bhagavan came and persuaded him, no, come to France. So we went to France, and at the chateau there, first or second morning, Prabhupada called me in and he said, I want you to make that vada. So that was the one preparation, or one of the few preparations that I could make that Prabhupada actually liked. So he said, but I want you to put the neem in. He said, you have that neem? Oh, I was relieved. I'd almost thrown it out. I still had this packet of neem powder. So he told me, he said, now you put 1/3 neem and 2/3 the mashed up dal, and you cook these vadas. So I did that for his breakfast. Prabhupada looked at them. They'd come out, you know, green from all the neem. And then he took a bite of one. It was bitter. He said, I think maybe we put too much neem. Anyway, he ate them. And then after a couple of hours, just before lunch, he called me back in. He said, actually, he said, that was very nice. He said, that's really helped my stomach. So I was making these neem vadas for about a week. Prabhupada liked them. All right, we're definitely going to finish now. It's 9:30. Thank you all very much. I want to say a special thank you. I want to say a special thank you to all you resident Mumbaiites now, not Bombayites, Mumbaiites. This has been one of the best festivals I've been to ever in Iskcon. Just seeing so many wonderful God brothers, God sisters. 40 years, I can't imagine, 40 years. I remember when I first joined in Sydney in 1972. Upendra Prabhu was there. He and Bali Mahadan had been the ones that had introduced Krishna consciousness to Australia. And Upendra was still there when I joined in early February of 1972. So he used to regularly tell us stories about Srila Prabhupada, things that had happened here and there. And it was, really, really wonderful hearing all the pastimes. So I know, of course, Iskcon now is so big, it's spread so far and wide. We have that responsibility to preserve Srila Prabhupada as he is as much as possible. That's been our effort. What was I going to say? Now I've forgotten what I was going to say.
You are to all of us what Upendra was to you.
My brain's gone blank. What was I going to say? Oh, he told me one time about chanting. He said that either he or somebody that he knew once asked Srila Prabhupada, how long did it take you to perfect your chanting? And Prabhupada apparently had replied, 30 years. So when I heard that, I was still a Bhakta. I'd been in the temple about a week. And I was thinking, 30 years? How am I, you know, how long are we going to be around? It's going to take 30 years to perfect my chanting. So now here we are, 45 years on, and my chanting is still as bad as ever. So I think it'd probably take me about 30 lifetimes to perfect my chanting. But time passes. You know, we couldn't, at that time, I was 21 years old when I joined. My temple president was Mohanananda Prabhu. He was 19 years old. So the oldest person in the temple was Raghunath. He was 28 years old. We all thought that he was ancient. But here we are, 45 years on, still chanting. Movement is growing. I'm sure Prabhupada is extremely pleased, you know, to see so many wonderful new devotees, especially here in India. He particularly wanted to attract the educated boys to spread Krishna consciousness. So this is a wonderful example of remaining true to Prabhupada's desire and Prabhupada's teachings. This is the result. If you just stick with what Prabhupada gave us, don't change anything, just follow the same simple formulas. Chant Hare Krishna, follow the regular principles, worship the deities as gorgeously as possible. Prabhupada said in Australia when he saw Radha Vallabha in Melbourne, he said, so as you dress the deities more gorgeously, then you will also become more gorgeous. So Radha Ras Bihari, they have a special place in Iskcon's history. My dear sir, you kindly sit down here and do not move, and I'll build you a big temple. So here he is. Srila Prabhupada is in every atom of this land, Hare Krishna land. You just have to plug in, and everything will happen like magic. So thank you all very, very much. This festival, as I say, it's been so well organized. Everybody's so nice, so polite, so wonderful. So let's hope that we're still around in another 10 years. We can do the 50th. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Ras Bihari ki jai. Go Premanandi.